my harm though compared to everyone else is going to be so small so as to make the externality of what I say almost nothing?
Often.
Okay.
But in that case, that's okay. So this will be a case when your externality will be large in this auction thing. So in the auction, what happens is that when I bid, right, what's my externality? It's that the other guy who was bidding before doesn't get to win, right? And so when I win and I just beat a guy, my externality is how much he was willing to pay, right? And so that's how much I should pay, how much he was willing to pay, right? And that's exactly the idea of the second price auction. Now, note that you always want to bid in this auction exactly what you're willing to pay for the object. Why is that? Well, first, notice that how much you pay only depends on whether you win or not. It doesn't depend on exactly what you bid, right? Because it only depends on what the second highest person bid. It doesn't depend on what you bid. Now, you never want to bid less than what it's worth to you, and as a result maybe lose the auction, right? Because imagine that there was someone between what you end up bidding and your value, then you could have bid just a bit higher than him and won it, paid less than what it was worth to you, and you'd be better off, right? Similarly, you never want to bid above what it's worth to you and end up winning for that reason, because if someone bids above what it's worth to you but less than what you bid, you end up winning and paying more than what it's worth to you, and you're worse off, right? So you always have an incentive to bid exactly what it's worth to you. And all that the Vickrey-Clark-Groves mechanism is a generalization of this. So one way you could think about that is imagine that rather than auctioning off one thing, we're auctioning off 100 things, right? And they're all different. And in fact, this happens. So the US government auctions off the right to the spectrum that the cell phone companies use and that the television companies use to broadcast and to allow you to do telecommunications, right? And the way they do this is that they slice up the country into all these different regions. Yeah, go ahead.
Are all the bids made simultaneously?
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, one version of this, which is very, very similar, which is used even more in practice, is just an English auction where like people, the price is rising and people say, do you want to bid a little bit more? And people raise their hands. You can just think you have in the back of your mind at what price you're going to stop bidding, right? And you always end up paying the price at which the next person drops out of the auction, because you just pay a little bit more than them, right? So that's actually very similar to a second price auction. Yeah?
Wouldn't you also bid your value if it was like a first price? Like if it's
No, because then you're going to want to reduce your value to bid just a little bit more than what you think the other person's going to bid at the auction, right? Because then you're forced to pay the price that you bid, and that's really bad for you. Imagine that you know that the other guy's only going to bid $10 and it's worth $100 to you. You'd bid $11 just to beat him. You wouldn't bid $100. See what I mean? Yeah, eBay is like this too, right? You say how much you're willing to bid, and then it keeps bidding for you, and so that you're just beating the next guy. Yeah, Eric.
So is the second price auction like a sealed bid kind of thing? Where
It is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So doesn't that mean there's some incentive for people to bid slightly above what they value the object at?
No.
That doesn't make sense, right?
They don't. They have an incentive to bid exactly what they value it at. So if you want, imagine that we were trying to, rather than auctioning off one thing, auction off this whole set of different spectrum across the country. And some companies might want to get a little bit of spectrum all over the country so that they can be a nationwide telephone network. Another one might want a lot of spectrum in one area because they're a TV channel, etc. So then you can't just say, well, what's the second price? Because there's no one thing. There's all this different stuff. So what you have to do instead is say, if I hadn't bid for anything, what would have the allocation of all the stuff been? Given that I bid, how much worse off is everybody else who bid, and that's how much I have to pay. That's the natural generalization of the second price auction. Yeah?
How is this different from the Dutch auction?
The Dutch auction is very similar to a first price auction. So what happens in a Dutch auction is the price starts high, and then it comes down. right? And so what that means is that people are going to drop out of the Dutch auction. People are going to raise their hand in the Dutch auction to buy it at some price, and that's not the price where they necessarily think that it's worth to them. They're just trying to stop somebody else from getting in before them and grabbing it.
Okay.
So that's much more similar to the first price auction.
So it's like the reserve price versus like the value. Like in the Dutch auction, you're going down to your reserve price.
No, in the Dutch auction, you're going down to not a reserve price, just to whatever you're willing to offer. You know, it's very much like the first price auction. You're trying to figure out what's the point at which the next person's going to get in, and I want to get there just before him. It's not that I'm going to raise my hand at my value. Right? Okay. So this is also used over at the Booth School for how they give people courses. So people have like a bunch of artificial currency. They can bid for a group of courses, and then they have to pay however much value the other person would have of getting into that course, and so forth. And there are many proposals to use this in practice, and in fact, one is related to a paper that I wrote. So rather than having eminent domain, where the government comes in, just takes someone's property and then pays them what they think is a reasonable compensation, instead you could have the government say, here's how much I'm willing to pay to take the property. The person could say, here's how much the property's worth to me, and then they could each, or there could be a lot of people that they want to take it away from, and then everyone could have to pay their externalities on everybody else as a result of that happening. So that's one proposal that's been made. Okay. That's I guess all I have to say. So I'll see you guys on Tuesday. Good luck with the problem set.